I wrote a fairly extensive document, sent it to Cheryl, and she just sent back an annotated version of it, which was really nice work. Thank you, Cheryl. Appreciate that. And so there, you know, two or three of us have been kind of cooking it up a little bit. And as soon as it gets a little bit more ready for prime time, we'll be sharing it, and then we'll be looking for everybody's input on it. So any questions about that?
Maybe just explain a bit more the intention of the document.
Well, why don't you do that, since I've been talking some?
Oh, okay, let me. So Peter and I suspect a bunch of other people think that the current nuclear weapons abolition movement is too weak, too much in silos that are not collaborating with each other. And it was his idea that we would have an overall strategic plan, maybe lasting, you know, with a timeline of several years. This is not your 2-week plan. This is your several years plan to work out how to improve the nuclear weapons abolition movement, specifically in the US. And he has written, it's a 6-page document with many bullet points, whereas he's using the Bill Moyer's Stages of a Movement document to kind of guide him, which I must admit I didn't actually go and look at. I didn't have time. But he's listed things like values, what the values of the movement should be. I've suggested that the activists should also have values they follow that may be different from the values of the movement as a whole. And then the goals of the movement, and then objectives, and many objectives, ending up years ahead, I suppose, with the US actually ratifying the TPNW. So kind of all the steps we need to go along the way. And he's got a lot of strategies that he suggests that some people are using, and possibly some new ones that Peter has thought up. So that's, and I think it's amazing, Peter, all the different things you managed to cram into this 6 pages. And I just got just to say another strategy I just heard. I'm on the Win Without War email list. It's a fairly large organization in Washington, DC, Win Without War.
Yep.
Their latest strategy is we all take a selfie with some kind of sign. In particular, they're talking about the Iran and the new Iran nuclear deal that we're trying to finish off. And you take a selfie of yourself with saying that, you know, we should finish this deal and get it done. And then they will take your photo and your message and blow it up and stick it on the side of a car and drive around Washington, DC with it, trying to show public, as Peter says in his thing, you know, the public voice and all this nuclear weapon is not as loud as it used to be. It needs to be louder. How do we get our Congress people, with whom a lot of the power over nuclear weapons, because they authorize the money, that's where the power is, that they need to understand there is a lot of people out there in the general public who are worried and don't want nuclear weapons and want new deals with Iran and so on. So driving around Washington, DC, where hopefully they'll see us on our photos on the outside of these cars. Anyway, so that's a strategy you don't have in here yet, Peter. I just read about
Not
it.
a strategy, it's a tactic.
Tactic,
But,
okay. All right, there's a difference. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
One thing that I would like to emphasize that Cheryl didn't mention, thank you for that summary, Cheryl. One thing that she didn't mention was that there are a lot of people working on a lot of different aspects of this. And I've had a conversation via email recently with Tim about this. And I do not by any means want to tell people work on this and don't work on that. Although, you know, I have my own opinions as to what's effective and what isn't. But I have a lot of respect for anybody who's working on this in any way, shape, or form. And as Tim pointed out, none of us knows which of these directions and approaches is going to be the most effective. And so what I think is important is not that we try and convince each other that we're right about these things, but that we find ways to work together so that we can celebrate each other's victories instead of trying to be in competition with each other. So I think that's a really important part, and that's why this strategic document has everything that I've heard about in it. And you know, if there's stuff that I haven't heard about, we need to include that in there. So that's one thing. Another thing that Cheryl didn't mention that I think is important is that I've suggested a series of examples of performance measures that we might hold our movement up to. In other words, say, here's a performance measure that tells us if we're having the kind of effect that we hope we're having. And if we are, then good, and let's carry forward with that. If we aren't, then let's reconfigure what we're doing so as to have a better chance of having success. So all those things are incorporated into the document, although, as Cheryl said, we're just at the beginning of this process, and it's a process that hopefully will guide us, into the future. And as soon as one puts a strategy down, of course, things change. If I've done this document before February 24th, we'd be needing to change it now. So that's understood. Okay. Any comments, thoughts, input on that? Tim?
Yeah, can you just say where this group fits into that? Because you started out saying you want to have an evaluation at the end about keeping the focus. I'm not quite sure what focus you mean, but I'm not clear. I mean, we've already got a network of groups, of working groups, working on different aspects of the nuclear issue and trying to work very concretely on specific things. And this is the Localities and Legislators one. And so I don't know where that fits into your grand strategy, and I don't know where the grand strategy fits into the remit of this particular group. Can you say more about that?
Yeah. As far as where this fits into the mission of this particular group, the Localities and Legislators has kind of defined itself as working on local type strategies. It started out talking about the resolutions, but we early on decided that we would not restrict ourselves to that. And so in terms of where do we go next with local organizing, it seems to me we need a little bit of direction as to what is a productive way to go and what's not. And that's what this strategic effort is all about. It's coming out of this group because I proposed it to this group and there was interest in this group about it. It wouldn't necessarily have to come out of this group, but my belief is that our movement needs this. and it's got to come from somewhere. So that's about as good an answer as I guess I can give you. Is that satisfactory?
Well, that's up to everybody in the group, I guess. I mean, for me, I mean, I've said to you, and I've said in this group, I think, and I've not been part of it for several months, so I'm coming back in. But for me, you know, there are lots of very specific, concrete things that need to happen, and having groups that are willing to work on some of those is a fantastic way to move forward. And I'd like to see that, you know, actually working and functioning. And you know, I don't know what has drawn this group to move beyond resolutions, and what exactly you mean by local organizing. But I mean, local organizing can mean anything. So I think having some kind of parameters around that would be helpful. And the bigger picture, you know, I think is actually emerging in lots of different ways by what people have the willingness and the commitment and the energy to work on. And it's fine to have a strategy, but if there's nobody to do it, it's not going to get very far. And you know, we've got people working on some specific things, and I think that's a good way to move forward, personally. Uh-oh, I'm getting an echo.
Susan?
Oh,
So
You're muted, Susan.
I'd like to try to pull that together. As an example, in the Mass Peace Action Nuclear Disarmament Working Group, we had a group who said, let's put forward the total elimination of nuclear weapons within the decade. How are you going to do this? So at first they outlined the various steps, things that had to be done. So in a sense, that was, you know, what they were going to do. In essence, they were not any different than what people have been trying to do all along in different ways. But as seen as an aspirational goal, that was nice. And hopefully it will help spur us on. Although it doesn't mean that there are more people working on this than there were before, but it does give a title of a sense of urgency. We in our groups do what we can as they arise. You know, like right now with, you know, looking at Timon, one of the things we're going to be working on is possibly passing a nuclear weapons commission in the state legislature. And that's something that we can do, yeah, aside from various other kinds of things. But it seems like your writing, Peter, gives some thinking, a framework. And I haven't seen it, but I'm just wondering if that gives a framework for us to be working out of. At the same time, we are doing what we can wherever we can do it to further the goal, you know, within our communities, and also, you know, on a legislative basis and within our communities, both at the same time, because that has to be on a community basis and on a legislative basis. So I would look forward to seeing what you've written, and hope that it gives, you know, some further thinking and meat to our work in whatever we're doing. Just some thoughts.
Thank you. I realize that I've been remiss in not getting a note taker since Bruce is not here. Is anybody able to do that?
I can try. I know Ellen's recording this,
Yeah, that'll be useful.
so that'll be helpful. So just to say, within the strategies of Peter's document, there are, acknowledgements that there are many groups already working on various aspects of abolishing nuclear weapons and the effects of nuclear weapons, and the fact we need to be divesting from companies. So all the things that are happening are in there. I see it as a document attempting to bring all this information, all the details about what is actually already happening in the movement into one document. And then one of the goals being to get more people involved and to appeal to the public who need to be more education information for the public. So yes, there are many groups already doing that, and I just thought, see, Peter is trying to just get it all down into one document. So, and then what he hasn't done yet is, he's put a timeline on this. So Susan, your group in Massachusetts, put a 10 years, aspirational. I think that's a good word, aspirational goals. So, so it's not. I don't think it's supposed to dictate what this group actually does. It's a bigger, broader document than what we're all trying to do. So that Peter, I'm suggesting, Peter, you've been involved in this for some decades. So you're looking back at how it used to be, and you're trying to see if we could make it a stronger movement in the future.
Right, trying to learn some lessons, realizing that things have changed a lot since I was very heavily involved. Margaret, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I came to this group. I was thinking that it would be people from all over the country and who are working on different things and would share what they're doing. And that as we work on our different things, like we got very involved here, hearing Ira Health and talk about Back from the Brink. And that really inspired us to go wholeheartedly into that campaign. And that is a nationwide campaign with the goal of really building a grassroots movement to show Congress that there is all of this support, because they're the ones that have to change the nuclear policy. So that's what I was actually expecting from this group. And I don't know, do other people have that? I think Denise Dufeld, am I saying her name right, who's very involved with the Back from the Brink campaign. She was initially with this group. Is anybody else involved with Back from the Brink? No. Well,
Yeah,
Yeah, I am.
yeah.
so anyway, I just thought I'd put that out there, that was what I was thinking this group was going to be.
I get that also.
I mean, is it sorry, I don't know what the,
Go ahead, Tim.
is it an option to set up another group to talk about strategy and work on your document, and to really try to focus this group, like Margaret said, on sharing what's going on in different parts of the country? What can we learn from each other at the local level, and what are we doing going forward? Because that's what I was hoping we would do in this group. And we've just, I don't know if any of you have seen our newsletter we just put out this morning. At the local level, one of the things that's just happened here in Massachusetts is the Worcester City Council passed a resolution. Now, I know you're saying you're not only looking at resolutions, but that's one concrete thing. Back from the Brink are doing lots of resolutions. There are other things going on, at the local level. And, if we learn from each other what those things are, what we're doing, and can support each other, maybe we get some more people in this group to do that. Because there are lots of things going on all over the country. I know there are.
Joan?
Did you say Joan?
Yes.
Yeah, about the last thing you said there, Timon, what's going on all over the country makes me think of what are we doing to connect with those other people, and what are we all doing around the country to find the places where people are not working on something already, and do we know people there who probably would if they knew and had the kind of thing you've put together, Peter, and communication with other folks. Is there a group that is there a different group that is leading coordination and encouragement and that kind of thing? Maybe it's back from the Brink, I don't know.
Just to respond to a couple of things that have been said, here in Salem, we just passed a back from the Brink type resolution at our city council beginning of this month. And it was passed unanimously. This happened because there have been a group of us working on local politics here in Salem for about the last 6 or 7 years, with an attempt to shift the city council from being a pro-development tool of the rich and elite to being representatives of the actual people who live here. And I think we've been very successful. We swung it around. We swung the majority around about 4 years ago, and we've been able to keep it so far, been able to keep it progressive. And now we have a progressive majority, a substantial progressive majority on the city council. So when I took the resolution to them, I got quite a lot of support right away. And when, as it turned out, they voted on it a few days after the Ukraine invasion, and virtually every member of the council spoke to the resolution as they said that they were going to vote for it, and pointed out that the Ukrainian situation makes it clear that we absolutely need this. I thought, well, that's really cool, because they could have argued the other way. And I was afraid that a couple of them might, but they didn't. And so that was pretty cool. And as far as how we bring in more people, the TikTok project is intended to do exactly that, to reach out to younger folks that there's 1 billion of them on TikTok, and try and reach out to them and say, hey, here's something pretty interesting that you probably ought to be worried about, because if you're concerned about climate change at all, this is climate change on steroids in terms of destroying your future. So those are strategies that are intended to build the movement, both of them. As far as whether we should be doing this in a different group, we could. And I approached Ralph Hutchison about whether we should have a separate strategy group in the collaborative, and he was kind of lukewarm about that. So I brought it to this group. Susan?
Well, again, I really look forward to seeing what you've written, because even if we are down in the trenches doing our individual work, whatever we can do in whatever area it is, having a kind of strategy and a general frame is helpful, and some thinking. And Cheryl, as you talked about it, that sounds great, to something, putting it all together. And it doesn't mean, again, that we have to follow every step of it, but that it's there for us as a resource and as a way of thinking. So I think it's helpful. But then also within this group, it's been great to hear what other people are doing and where they're doing it. And like Joan, I remember, are you down in down south somewhere, or mid south?
No, not
Right.
San Diego or whatever, but San Jose, which is very close to Palo Alto, which is where Cheryl is,
Okay.
in the
all right.
southern end of the San Francisco Bay Area.
Well, someone, I thought it was you, but somebody was talking about getting religious, religious groups to talk. Oh, no, it was you when we were talking about the Archbishop, right? And then
Oh,
extend.
I was the one who brought this up
Oh, okay.
last time. Yeah.
And then
What-
also, hearing what Holly is doing, where she is, this is all helpful and sharing. And in a way, my perception was that this was the group, the national group, that was organizing everybody. And we're finding out what other people are doing across the country in different ways. So I thought this was it, and it's true that we were going to have, and Cheryl, I know you were making some document, or was it Denise making a document that would put everybody's activities on a page, and we'd be able to see what people were doing.
Yeah,
I
that
got lost with
exists.
that technical ability. I couldn't, it was beyond me, but it felt like this was the group that was helping to do that.
May I say something?
Sure.
One, I think Timon has been working on a wonderful online document that helps with the lobbying in Congress. And I wanted to bring up that Alliance for Nuclear Accountability is asking people today to let them know if you're interested in participating in their online DC days, which will be in May. And I can put the information into the chat so that you can check on it. And I wanted to make sure this was clear. And I would like to reserve for the end to talk to anybody who is interested in the Unitarian Universalist resolution, because I checked what Cheryl provided. And while that's excellent, the resolutions that are being presented are not, I think, exactly right. And what Bruce Shea sent me didn't fit either. So I'd like some help on drafting something, if somebody would like to help me with that. That's all I have to say.
Drafting what exactly, Helen? I didn't quite understand what you're asking for.
My UU minister, it said that he had talked to the board and that they were very interested in whatever resolution I might bring to them about the TPNW. So, and about Norton's bill too, the economic conversion and whatever else we have. And I'd like to be able to, I'd like to help you in whatever way I can. I'm very busy, but I do like to, I think that we really definitely need to have some kind of a place where all of the information, we can, a calendar, for example, who's doing what where, that's online that people can easily find. And we're working on a calendar for the new WILF page. And I suppose we could incorporate it there, but also maybe it'd be possible to have another calendar that's specifically for us. And I will be putting this recording up on YouTube, and I'll provide everybody with the link. It's not published, but it's available.
And you're putting the information about the ANA lobby
Yes,
days?
I'll
Okay.
put it in the chat.
So, I think we've discussed before that, you know, there's 8 of us here, but the mailing list for this is 30 or so people. And
Yeah.
so some people don't come at all. Some people come not so often. But we created that. It's an Excel sheet of all the cities that have already passed resolutions. That is in a Google Doc that we have put in the chat several times, which I hope you all kept and know where it is. So as Joan said, trying to identify cities that have not done this yet should be one of our group's tasks. And because
there is the document that that you just referred to, that Denise put together, that lists them all, and they're also on her website. The PSRLA. Well, no, it's the Prevent War. It's the not the PSR one. It's the Prevent War, which is the Back from the Brink website. But there's also the one that Susan mentioned, which is one that we started early, kind of a clearinghouse of resources that are available. And we put that one in the chat too, and we could put that in the minutes as well, that we started putting together and that various people have added to, but that still could have a lot more added to it that would be useful as in terms of a resource that local groups could use to find what they're looking for within the movement, in terms of information, in terms of groups, in terms of approaches, whatever. There's a lot of stuff in that document as well. So we have done those kinds of things. So with Cheryl's input and the input of maybe 1 or 2 other people that I've shared this with, we'll kind of get something together and put it out to you before the next L&L meeting, and you can kind of look it over and see what you think and whether you think it's useful, and if so, how you think it should be modified. With respect to that, one of the objectives that I put in was a no first use objective, since I know there's a lot of people working on that. And Susan, I just earlier today cribbed a piece that Massachusetts Peace Action put together about that, which was very good, I thought, a very detailed strategy as to how they were going to get that to happen. And I just took that and dropped it right into the document. Cheryl hasn't seen that yet, but I just did that a few hours ago. And that's the kind of thing that I think is really useful. If we have that work already done, let's bring it all together and see how it cross-pollinates, because a lot of what was in there was very what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, it worked together real well with what I had already written. So, that's good, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. Find out how it all fits together and articulate that. So are there any other things that people would like to report to this group that they're doing? Because there's Margaret was telling us that she really appreciates hearing what other people are doing.
Susan has a hand up.
Oh, sorry, Susan.
And as Tim said, it's quite a report that probably came to all of us. I don't know for sure. Maybe if people did not get it, we could let him know. But meanwhile, Susan's ready.
So something that came to mind, we have some interns that from Mass Action, and a few are working on the Nuclear Disarmament Working Group. And one possibility is for them to put on or decide on a movie that they would like to show, and also be the panelists for in an effort to engage college kids, because their perception is that college kids are not really talking about nuclear weapons. Now, they've got all kinds of other things on their mind, but yet this is so important, you know, for future. So that this is just one thing. You know, we talk about TikTok, and then here is a program put on by college kids for college kids, also hopefully trying to get high school kids too. It may work by the time, you know, if they've got to leave in May, and so who knows if it'll really happen, but we're working on it.
In the 80s, the film The Day After, you probably all remember that, was very well promoted before it came out. And when it did come out, all the groups kind of said, oh, okay, we're going to arrange showings. And that was one of the things that kind of kicked the movement into a higher gear, I thought, was that it got so much publicity and so many people were talking about it at that time. And we could use another movie like that. If anybody knows, has a Hollywood connection.
There's Don't Look Up that people have been talking about. We've shown War Games, but it's, you know, what would college kids really be interested in? So that I don't know. I don't think it's the War Games. I think that's too hard, too harsh for them. So if anybody has any suggestions, let me know.
Yeah, Don't Look Up has generally been interpreted as an allegory about the climate change issue, but it could equally well be about nuclear weapons, but nobody's talking about it that way.
Yeah. So it, you know, another film, I don't know of another one. Oh, there was, I did hear about a film that young people had made, and it was a series of films. Does that ring a bell with anybody? And some kids and, you know, young people, not kids, but young people in Canada, and they were looking at, and it had to do with, I thought, nuclear weapons.
There are, I think ICANN has a whole series of really good young people's short ones. Of you know, I've seen there was one where they were just interviewing each other. You know, like people in college or whatever. You know, what do they know about nuclear weapons? And it was pretty shocking how little they knew. But there's those kind of things. I think they're on ICANN YouTube or something.
ICANN YouTube? How would I find it? At the website?
If you go to YouTube and Google for ICANN,
Okay.
or nuclear weapons. I don't know.
Okay.
The other group that puts out pretty impressive stuff is Outrider Foundation. Do you know them?
No.
They've made a few short films that are targeted towards young people.
In fact, they just started releasing them in the last month.
Oh, okay.
I saw the first one, and I actually was trying to put their, I was trying to join their communications expert with somebody from Wilf, because they wanted to get a broader viewing audience. And I actually, their then executive director is sitting on a different committee with me from the American Physical Society, but she actually just moved to the Union of Concerned Scientists. But Outrider Foundation, and they're, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes long, but they give you,
Yeah, they're short. Yeah.
yeah, a lot of information with some very good graphics and images to, but how, you know, and they're tweeting about them. So sometimes I see a tweet come across. So it's called Outrider, spelled as you would imagine, Foundation. It probably is outrider.org.
Thank you very much.
And I think they probably got a bunch of money.
Well, they have lots of money. Don't worry.
Right. Are they getting it from Plowshares, or you don't know?
No, they have their own money. I mean, it's kind of funny because we've been working with them on various projects, and their founder is a billionaire or whatever, give them all the money, but he won't. All his money is, well, not all of it, obviously, but you know, some of his money is in the nuclear weapons companies, and so he's not into divestment. So we tried to get them onto divestment, and he said nope. So they do some really excellent stuff, but there are limits. There are limits with the Outrider,
Right.
as there are with Plowshares as well. But anyway.
Okay, that's right.
So, I would be hoping that this latest awful situation in Ukraine and the general talk about, if we're not careful, we'll be into a nuclear war, would have actually got the attention of young people. But I don't know if we can depend on that. But certainly we should be using that unfortunate circumstance to our advantage here, to make, you know, the general public. I think it has definitely affected some of them.
A friend just noticed at the supermarket, one of the, you know, these daily shock newspapers that you see, you know, the going out.
Check out
right. And it was a big, scary picture, and it had to do with nuclear holocaust coming to your town, or, you know, something like that. So when it gets to the checkout aisle of your local supermarket, you know that it's on people's minds.
Definitely. That's a really good indicator.
Was it the National Enquirer or something like that?
Yeah, something like that. Right. I can send you a picture of it if you're interested.
Absolutely.
So, okay.
Is
So-
any group working on divestment at this point?
That's there's supposed to be a divestment group as part of this collaborative, and I don't know who was in it before or what it was doing before, but it seems to be defunct at the moment. And Vicky and some others are trying to get it going again, because there are a lot of things going on with divestment, and including, New York City and all, there's lots of exciting things. And so I hope that group will I mean, I don't know if, did they talk about it at the collaborative or the coordinating meeting, Peter?
A couple of meetings ago, it was noted that there didn't seem to be any activity around it, but that's all. It's an important thing for us to be looking at. As a matter of fact, one of the city councilors, when we passed our resolution, said, maybe we should be divesting. And it was kind of a throwaway comment, but I picked up on it. And after we got the thing passed and got all the bugs worked out of it, I just wrote the city attorney the other day and said, well, Councilor Anderson mentioned that, and I think we might want to take a look at whether Salem has any investments in nuclear weapons, and how would I find that out? Do you know? He hasn't gotten back to me on that yet, but I think he will. And if not, I will take it up with one or more of the counselors.
I have a question.
Yeah, Joan?
Yeah, I can see a couple different angles on divestment. One is stop having investments in those companies, and the other is keep your investments and try to influence the companies. Is there a particular angle on it that we're looking at here?
Well,
both have been done.
Both, yeah.
Right.
I mean, Vicky bought a share in Honeywell, and we went to their annual meeting and spoke. Raised hell at Honeywell. We have a little video about that. And there are groups that do that. And in fact, they're Don't Bank on the Bomb, who I'm sure you all know, has been working with some groups that have not just turn up and try to raise hell, but actually have resolutions that have to go through the whole process. And, they won't get passed because they have, one person has a block vote of 1 million votes or whatever, but, they're on the agenda. And so they have to talk about them and they have to vote on them. So there's, there are things like that to do. And there's also the whole harassing of the CEOs of these companies and, getting on their Twitter and Facebook and all the rest of it and hounding them about, what are they doing about this? So there's, but the divestment and boycotting and, all the things, economic pressure that we can put on these companies is certainly from a strategic point of view has got to be a big piece of it, because already, if you're following Don't Bank on the Bomb, internationally, this is already having a definite impact. There's literally billions that are being withheld from the nuclear weapons companies already, from countries in Norway, in Netherlands, and these places. And the more the treaty, so the treaty meeting that's coming up in Vienna, which is now going to be in June, I'm really hoping that the countries that have ratified the treaty are going to start turning the screws on the companies, because that's the main way that they can have an effect on the US. It's these companies, and Ireland already has this incredibly powerful legislation that says, anybody having anything to do with nuclear weapons is violating Irish law and can be sent to prison for life. And all we need is, some CEO to go visit Ireland and be told at the airport that, you can't have it both ways. Anyway, there's lots of exciting things going on there, and some of it is local, like New York City, big but local, and some of it is to do with, I know, Cheryl, I think we were trying to work with you on Stanford University, because we've been working on Yale for 4 years now, trying to get them to divest. They literally wrote the book on ethical investment, and yet they have, billions invested in these companies. And so it's all these things, bit by bit, are chipping away. And that's I think that's really important myself.
Right, the Stanford, they fossil fuel, they had a bigger coalition of Stanford students who were working on the fossil fuel investments of Stanford's $23 billion in the stock market or so. And they finally did get the Board of Trustees to agree to not divest in fossil fuel companies. But the reasoning the Board of Trustees gave was nothing to do with the influence, not being influenced by these students, saying that they didn't want them to invest in oil and what have you. It was because they could foresee that it wasn't going to be a good investment, because as we all try to move away from oil and coal-fired power stations and get our electric cars, then the worth of those companies, their shares, were not going to be worth as much. So best to sell, so that was their reasoning. It was nothing to do with the morals or the ethics of climate change. It was all to do with the money.
Yep. That's fine. I don't mind.
Whatever works.
Whatever works, exactly.
So what ICANN says regarding nuclear weapons and nuclear weapon companies is we've got to, bring shame on them and make people not wish to invest in Lockheed Martin because of the moral nuclear weapons and the harm they will do to civilians. Of course, as we see in Ukraine, you can harm civilians without nuclear weapons, just with regular bombs. But nevertheless, to try to get the universities with these big endowments to also see that Lockheed Martin and Honeywell are not good investments. We've got to somehow or other bring that.
The term non-performing assets is a good one for that.
Okay.
Because that's what nuclear weapons are. They're non-performing assets.
Mm-hmm.
You can't use them. If you do, it's all over. And so that's kind of financier speak for for something you don't want to invest in.
Trouble is, of course,
But right now, isn't there an effort against Lockheed Martin? I thought this was a national effort that I was reading, and we were asked to sign on.
Yeah.
And people were taking actions all over about
in
Lockheed
August, I
Martin.
believe it's August the 28th.
Right.
It's the day of their annual general meeting,
Yes. That's
and they
it.
want us all to be outside their many buildings in many different states demonstrating.
This is the opposite of the fossil fuel situation, though, because the people are protesting because they're making a killing literally off of the Ukraine war.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
these same companies that make nuclear weapons are making all these other weapons, and they're making a fortune. And so they are a good investment for investors. It's going to be very hard to make the argument that it's not. Whereas, there are a few that are only involved in the nuclear industry, like Aerojet Rocketdyne or whatever it's called, which just makes rockets. I guess they might make non-nuclear ones too. I don't know. Anyway.
Right. That was I was about to say was that unfortunately Lockheed Martin is making a lot of money because it makes all these other weapons that are not nuclear and selling them to the Saudis and then selling them to the US, who lends them to Ukraine, which of course is against all that forwarding of weapons to Ukraine, because it's only having the whole war continue. And
So in a way,
ceasefire is what we should aim for. Yes.
This is something that, in a sense, we can be doing within our own communities. So in a sense, localities, this gets down to localities. What in our locality can we be protesting? Here in Massachusetts, we aim at Raytheon, but in other places there are other kinds of things. But that is something, and I guess is it the War Industries Network that is meeting, and and I guess it's a national group, and they try to coordinate activities. But yeah, I mean, it's a way at getting people's attention to nuclear weapons and the cost of nuclear weapons, both the danger and the cost.
John?
I have, this is a relatively minor thing compared with what Susan was talking about. You use the term non-performing in terms of investments and so on. And what came to my mind was they probably are performing in terms of investments, but we wish that they would be non-performing, like not using the crap they're building. So I guess the non-performing really refers to the investment aspect, though, right? But they are performing, right?
Yeah.
Financially, they are.
Yeah.
Practically, they're not.
I mean, the term that, just to throw into the discussion about divestment, the term that our divestment guy, Nick Cantrell, that some of you know have met, he talks about, and Don't Bank on the Bomb talks about legislative risk and other kinds of risk, because it's not so much that they're non-performing assets, it's the fact that other countries are outlawing nuclear weapons, and so it puts there's the risk of stranded assets, which is the whole thing about fossil fuels, that they're putting all this money into weapons that are illegal and that other countries might or are banning, and so it's a financial risk from that point of view.
Thank you.
What you mean is the market for nuclear weapons is shrinking. There's fewer and fewer countries because of the TPNW who would want to buy them, right? So that's what you mean by stranded assets.
Still a lot of customers out there.
Right. Yeah. Unfortunately, the ones who are buying them are still buying them. But
okay, so could I? Oh, sorry, Joe. Do you still have your hand up?
Yeah. No. Go ahead.
Well, just to bring it back to the localities and legislatures, and the question that somebody raised earlier about how to reach places that we don't have represented on this call. One concrete example of this is Oakland, California, which I don't know how many of you know the history, but they passed this really strong legislation back in the 80s, banning everything to do with nuclear weapons, including divesting, including boycotting the companies. The U.S. government took them to court, and they lost. I mean, the government won because they said you can't tell the Port Authority of Oakland what to do or something, because it was a federal facility. So Oakland City Council rewrote their legislation and excluded the Port Authority, and it's still just as strong, and it still exists today. They still have this legislation, and my uncle lives in Oakland, but he's got health issues, and I haven't been able to get him to help. And there's some other people that we've been reaching out to in Oakland, but we need people in Oakland to just put some. I mean, it wouldn't take much to get Oakland to make a big thing about this, because they're still doing it. They have these forms that every single contract, and it's a big city, every single contract with the city of Oakland every contractor has to sign this affidavit saying that they have nothing to do with nuclear weapons, that they don't trade or buy or sell any parts or work with any of the companies, and it's a stronger bill than almost any other city that still has these kinds of rules. And there's more than 200 of these scattered around the country that we've been trying to track down. Oneonta, New York has one as well. And Ojai, California passed a really strong bill like this, but then they haven't implemented it. And so, like, there's a lot of work just to find people in some of these places and chase up and find out what's happening and publicize it, because there's a lot more that's going on, that people don't know about.
I think Cheryl and Ellen and I are all thinking the same thing. Most of these places you're mentioning, there are WILP branches with good people in them. And
Yeah.
so we need that list.
I wonder, doesn't Jackie Cabasso live in Oakland?
Yeah. And she said she was going to help with this, but she's not yet.
There's a WILP branch that's Berkeley, Oakland, as well as San Francisco. They work together.
Well, we got loads of people in Berkeley, but they won't cross the line into Oakland, or they need people in Oakland
Right.
to talk to the city councilors,
Yeah. Well, they probably know people. If we can just, maybe this is a good time to do it in the midst of the Ukraine thing, that,
Yeah.
because you probably have tried before and they didn't think it was going to get a response or something with all the things that people are coping with. But maybe we should take advantage of the Ukraine situation.
Right,
So,
I think,
Tim, are you saying that the ordinance is still on the books, but it's not being observed? Is that right?
It is being observed, but
Public doesn't know about it.
nobody knows about it, and the city itself is afraid to sort of publicize it.
Oh.
Because this has happened in other towns as well, that there have been movements to try to stop these nuclear-free zone things from the 80s. Tacoma Park in Maryland has another really good one, and there's people being elected to the city council to try to stop it now. So it's a sort of backward slide, and people are working on that. But I spoke to this Oakland City Council in a pub. They have open meetings, and anybody can go and speak for 5 minutes or whatever. And I asked them about this, and I went to the mayor's office, and I've been talking to various departments in the city office, and nobody really has all the pieces. And I've seen, as I said, they have this. They're definitely implementing parts of it, because they have this form, which I've seen, which they make every single contractor sign. They don't have a committee that monitors it. I was trying to find out about the divestment, and I couldn't really find out for sure if they're fully divested or still monitoring that or what. But there's the ordinance itself is still on their books.
So how are you thinking about using it?
Well, I wanted to get confirmation from the mayor or somebody that they're still committed to this, and get them to pass maybe a new resolution saying, Oakland is proud of, this heritage, and we now have the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, and we want to be aligned with it, and, or something, as far as I know, they haven't even done a back from the brink, but they're already way beyond that. They've got the whole divestment, boycotting, everything. But just to publicize it in Oakland and nationally, that Oakland is one of the, it's probably the biggest city that has this. Chicago is another one that has an ordinance that still exists from the 80s, but I haven't been able to find out from anybody in Chicago, what the status of it is. But there's, like I said, there's 200 of these around the country, and we've got some of them to move on it. Tacoma Park, Berkeley, Northampton, Massachusetts. A few other places have sort of publicized and picked up on it. But we're trying to encourage other cities to do this kind of thing, and the more we can make of the ones that have done it, and the more we can encourage cities to do more, cities that just pass a resolution, the next thing they could be talking about divestment, like you said, for Salem or whatever.
Yeah, Don't Bank on the Bomb, I thought, was giving very good information, almost training people who were interested to do divestment in their cities and towns. Or at least that was my memory from a year ago, but you know, a year ago is like,
Well, I just got a thing. I don't know if you've all seen it from. It just came just before this meeting from Anne Frisch. It's U.S. Service divest from nuclear weapons free web event in April.
mhm.
I'll just pass this on. I don't know what
So Anne is,
she's Rotary.
yes, so she's Rotary and she's a
So I don't know
rejoined
who's
Will. That would
okay.
be good.
So do you know about this thing?
No, I'm
No.
not on her email list, although I did meet with
That's
her when I was in Minnesota.
That's the link there.
Mm. Yeah.
Eventbrite. Okay. All right.
Put that
But
up.
as I said, there's several different people trying to reconstitute the divestment group, and because that is a whole sort of thing on its own, really.
Right.
Right. Susie Snyder, Don't Bang the Bomb. David Swanson is really good on that. Right. And
Yep,
Fresh
Code Pink is
with
doing
Rotary,
a lot.
Yeah. They've been doing a lot of good stuff. You know, I with the Ukraine issue, it feels like it's both. People are talking about nuclear weapons more, and in some ways, there's more. There feels like there's more room to address it, but on the other hand, is a feeling that we get with all of the media, the mass media, that we need to perfect our nuclear weapons, and we need to make our nuclear weapons bigger and better than the Russians. And so it's my father's mixed pickles.
Well, the deterrent argument is really interesting here because the whole idea was to deter war.
Right.
And obviously the fact that the Russians have nuclear weapons is what's keeping the United States and NATO from going into Ukraine. So basically the fact that, it's like a bunch of muscle-bound people walking up and down the beach and not being able to engage with each other because they've got nuclear weapons. And otherwise, if Russia didn't have nuclear weapons, the United States military would be in there with both feet. You know that.
Sure.
So the absurdity of the whole nuclear thing, I think, is just being played out right in front of our eyes.
Mm.
And I think that ought to be something that we can use. But, as Tim was saying, it cuts both ways.
It does.
The neocons are right now trying to convince Biden that they are doing no-fly zone and risk nuclear war because otherwise something worse things will happen or something whatever is
And we have
worse
to
than that. I don't know, but
spend more money and really work on making our nuclear weapons better and spreading them out more.
yeah.
We also
And
have a group,
making
now.
small nuclear weapons that can be
Well,
usable.
Battlefield.
the good news though is, as Peter said, in Salem as an example, that they voted in favor of this resolution unanimously because they're concerned about Ukraine. The exact same reasoning was used in Worcester, Massachusetts, a few days ago. They voted in favor of the Back from the Brink resolution and supporting the treaty because of Ukraine. The exact same argument was used in Wales, which is in our newsletter that went out this morning, that passed a resolution saying, the situation in Ukraine means all countries have got to sign and implement the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. So although there is all this scary stuff out there, we do have evidence, hard evidence, that it's having the right effects in some places at least. And so we need to build on that and
Sure.
and try to encourage people that, this
And
is a time
again, the way that how how do we build on it is one of the questions that I think we need as a movement to answer.
Okay, well, as we know, writing to your local newspaper and saying, did you realize that thus and such happened in Worcester? And did you know that the Welsh government, because I believe it was the whole Welsh government who made this statement, not just some small.
No, the Parliament, yeah.
Right, Parliament, Welsh Parliament, well, each, Wales, Scotland have their own parliaments. Anyway, that they made that statement, even though Britain, has its own nuclear weapons stored in Scotland, and if Scotland gets to divest itself from being part of Britain, they're going to send back the nuclear weapons. Anyway, so so letting the people know that this is going on is indeed it's all over the BBC News, but I've understood not many of you actually watch the BBC News on the web. It's got lots of information. Every half an hour there's something new that you can learn about their live stream.
But again, I go back to talking with people on the street. It's that, well, we need these nuclear weapons, and we just need to make them better. We need to make them bigger and better than the Russians. And it's not, they're scared, or they are more aware of nuclear weapons, but it doesn't necessarily translate to getting rid of them. It's make more. We have this group now, a new subgroup of nuclear disarmament working group on missile defense, and talking about how missile defense doesn't really work. Well, on the one hand, that's one reason to get rid of it. On the other hand, it's a reason to really pour a lot of money in to try to figure out how to make it work better. So what we see here as what makes sense to us is the challenge. Sorry for that.
So it's the American Physical Society had a working group who studied missile defense from the physics point of view, and they issued their report 2 weeks ago, which says, you can't fire a missile to stop a nuclear tipped missile coming towards you with sufficient accuracy and soon enough to stop them. I mean, they did all the computer modeling, and it came out with a big, their report came out with a big brouhaha. And I watched the seminar where they announced it, and they showed, especially North Korea, it's because you can't get close enough. You can't get your American ships, which have these missiles, to stop. You can't get them close enough to stop a North Korean nuclear tipped missile from doing damage.
Excuse me just a moment.
Yeah. So anyway, it's right.
Wait, where's Peter going? I thought he was in charge of keeping us on the focused on the agenda, which we're not.
No, we sort of went off. Right.
He said he apologized.
It is. So we're sort of talking about,
I think he got a phone call.
In our localities, what can we do within our localities? So sorry that I got us off.
And how can we help each other?
Yeah. Okay.
So that we don't all reinvent the wheel.
Yeah. Yes. Right.
Well, one of the relatively simpler things, even simpler than a resolution, is to get your city to join Mayors for Peace, which says your city is against nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
And some cities are a lot easier than others. We've been trying to get Palo Alto back in, but it hasn't worked yet. So these resolutions that are out there that people are using, you don't actually have a divestment clause in them. or it would make it harder to pass them if the resolution already had a divestment clause.
There's plenty that have put divestment in there.
Okay.
And you know, to actually divest, it requires more than just a resolution, because a resolution is not binding legislation. It's just a statement, you know.
Mhm.
So, you know, we're talking about ordinances and
Make it ordinance. Mhm, mhm.
I considered putting that in ours and decided that was gonna complicate things to the point where we might get bogged down and not get the thing passed at all. So I want to come back with it, you know, and say, okay, you guys took a position on this, now give it some teeth. But I need to find out whether we even have any nuclear weapons investments before we do that, because, you know, if we don't have any, then they're not going to want to pass an ordinance about it. So
a lot easier if you don't have any.
well, right.
And you
But
can just
they're
say
not
they're
gonna
not.
want-
On another aspect.
I mean, we got such a homeless problem in this town that the city council is absolutely consumed with it, and they're not going to want to spend time on something like this if it's not even going to have an effect.
Yeah, right.
Well, I've got a hard stop at 4:30, guys. I've got something else that I absolutely have to do, and so I want to kind of move into the last two items, which is making sure that we're on the same page in terms of our next meeting, and also doing the evaluation I mentioned at the beginning. So are we agreed that we're going to meet? Let's see, what? Look at the.
April 25th, 3 p.m. Pacific.
Right. Is that's what you've got, Ellen, and
No, it's supposed to be
that's what I
Tuesday.
thought. That's what I got too. Does that work for everybody?
No,
Sorry.
I have the 26th.
26th,
That's a Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Yes,
25th is a Monday.
right.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah, I think we decided on the Tuesdays.
Tuesday.
The
Yeah, we
first
did.
Tuesday, the last Tuesday of the month.
Yeah.
Well, this isn't the
Well,
last Tuesday of the
fourth
month.
Tuesday.
Well, the fourth Tuesday,
Oh,
but happens to be the last as well. in April.
Cutting out, Tim.
Okay,
But,
Yeah.
so Tim earlier suggested maybe that, you know, that there be a different subgroup who works on your strategizing for a better abolition movement. Do you want?
I gather it's a broader thing than
Right,
what
right.
to do in a locality.
Yes.
So it was suggested that maybe it not be, you know, a purpose of this small L&L group, but that it be a different group who takes it upon ourselves to create such a document. That Ralph decided was lukewarm.
De facto,
about.
it's kind of that way now.
Right. Because I think it would be, you know, I took a look at it, but in a bit of a rush. And anybody else who's good at writing and
Well, I want to talk with you sometime soon about it. I wrote you that, but you know, and then we'll see what our. See, I think that's Holly. Let me mute her.
Ollie's trying to say something, maybe.
anyway, so. But kind of separating that process, I think, from the L&L is probably a good.
Well, if it's the will of the group that happened, yeah, we can do that.
And I think probably it would be good to put the word out that whoever's working on it is working on it. And anybody else who wants to help from other groups, organizations, whatever, would be welcome. Then you get more input, possibly, more ideas, possibly.
It sounds like this is a topic that maybe we should take up next time, because it sounds like there might be a little bit more discussion about this. And I can't stay for it right now. So I would just like us to talk right now about, I wasn't very much more just directive this time or facilitative than I have been, but a little bit. So what were people's feelings about that? Did they like it, didn't like it, didn't see any difference, or what?
I didn't see much difference. I think there are particular people who can go on too long, and they weren't here in this meeting. So you didn't have to invoke your extra powers.
Right, there, it was a smaller group, so we were able to somewhere jump in.
And we had to skip one of the agenda items that was down for 15 minutes.
Right.
So it wasn't a fair test.
Oh, no.
Okay. Well, that said, and having our next meeting, I will assume that we will proceed that way next time. And if people feel that I'm being a little too autocratic, let me know.
Okay.
You're fine.
Okay.
Not autocratic.
Well, not today, but you know, I certainly can be if it's necessary. So I'll put the question of whether we want to keep strategy in this group on the next agenda.
And are you going to send your draft so that we know what you're talking about? Because Cheryl does, but the rest of us.
After Cheryl and I talk and
Make some changes.
maybe make some changes, then we'll send it out.
Great.
Like I said, before the next meeting.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Okay,
So
thanks.
I want to speak to Ellen. So Ellen, don't stop the meeting yet.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording though.
Okay. I'm gonna go
Take care,
ahead and
everybody.
Thanks for
leave.